What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today we have our first episode back after a short hiatus while I was moving last week, and we're going to jump into some updates. So, Bryan, what is going on with you? How's the last week been?
Dude, today we're going to call this like a massive mega episode because we are just bringing... Yeah. We exactly. The title is Updates Galore because we are just bringing all of our own updates and stories from the last 3 weeks because we didn't have an episode the prior week. We had Birdo the week before that. So there's so much stuff going on right now. First of all, and maybe most importantly, I look very clear on the camera right now because Aaron told me that I needed to buy a... what do we even call these? A webcam?
A webcam, yeah.
Yeah. So I now have a webcam. So I come across to you guys very clear from my basement here. Second, Aaron is in Bali, which means that we have this like obscure time that we're now recording this podcast, which by obscure, I mean 6 a.m. my time. And what is it, like 10 p.m. your time or something? 9 p.m.?
It's 8 p.m.
8 p.m. That's not even terrible.
No.
Yeah, all right. I think Aaron's got the good side of this stick, but it's all good because I actually am a morning person, and so I'm not like super down about this. But kind of as far as updates go, man, I separated mine out into dieting updates. I have some philosophical thoughts on dieting. I have some training updates, design of my new hypertrophy cycle, all sorts of stuff. So I don't know if we want to just jump right into this or I guess I kind of want to hear just very briefly how's the travel to Bali, how's Bali, and then maybe we can jump into some updates from there.
Let's do that. Yeah, so I said I spoke with a few clients of mine this week around this, and in typical Aaron fashion, I was a little overzealous in how well that I thought I would handle things. So Jenny was in a wedding that was in Mexico. Her best friend got married. That was last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then we did that and then rolled Sunday morning immediately into flying back to the United States in Miami to start our trip to Bali, which would take approximately 40 hours. So we had a 15.5-hour flight to Dubai, and then we had like a 15-hour layover in Dubai, and then like a 9-hour flight into Bali, and then we got into Bali on what ended up being super late Tuesday night, so like 2 a.m. local time by the time we like got through airport and everything. So it was a very hectic like 4 or 5 days, and then that whole Miami to Bali thing of like, okay, it's Sunday at noon and I'm leaving for this thing, and now I get there and it's Tuesday at 10 p.m. and you end up going like hours and hours and hours without eating and then sleeping on a plane. For me, it is just very, very difficult. So like I was like a zombie by the time I got in, and it was pretty rough on me. So that first day I just slept as much as I could, and then it wasn't until about Friday till I kind of felt, normal-ish. So that took its toll on me, and I was like a little grumpy, and it takes a lot for me to be grumpy. And it was just like, okay, I'm off there's no training. My nutrition is like whatever I can get my hands on pretty much. So by the time we got in, I was kind of beat up, but it was very fun once we got here. And I was able to put my thumb on it better this time around now that we've, been here a second time. But it's just like a very refreshing environment. Like so many people are here to do a lot of the same things. It's like everyone is into like eating healthy, and all the cafes have like different green drinks and smoothies and like really quality food, and you get a lot of sunshine. Everyone's going to the gym. There's like big on recovery stuff. So it's just like a really like inviting environment for a healthier lifestyle, which is really, really cool. So I'm very excited to be back. There is always the challenges now with how the business has grown. because it's just harder. To do a lot of like audio and video stuff like we're doing right now. So I'm still working through those challenges, but super excited to be back. And it's getting to give me like a very refreshing few months of my life of different things, which we'll get into as we get into some of the other updates. So happy to be back for sure.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm actually just curious. When you walk around town, you're in Canggu, right?
Canggu.
Canggu, yeah.
Yeah.
When you walk around town, what percentage of people do you think are local versus being some sort of tourist or like someone like you?
So American, very low. There's very low Americans,
Right,
actually.
but let's just say non-locals.
It was a joke. Yeah. It is
Yeah.
actually it's a lower split than you would think. There are a ton of locals around. It's hard to put a number on it because I'm really guessing, but I would say it might be like 60-40, like tourists to like locals, maybe 65-35, but there is still a lot of locals around. And one of the things that I would explain that's really cool about this area of Bali, like Canggu, and I could say like Bali in general, like if you remove tourism from it, the place would still be very, very cool. Like the locals have a very, very cool culture for themselves. And that's probably what started a lot of the tourism in the first place because of like what they do, especially for someone like me. Like surfing's really, really big here. Tattoo culture is huge here. There's tattoo shops on every single corner. Dirt bikes and motorcycle culture is very, very big. And people are just like super happy. Like everyone is super, super just in great moods. And that's the thing that's like really, really cool. If you remove the tourism, like the local culture is very, very cool.
Yeah, I actually feel very similarly about Santa Teresa, where I spent 3 months in Costa Rica in 2018 or whatever that was. So, cool. Well, that's awesome. I'm excited, and I'm glad we were able to find a podcast time that works out for both of us going forward. So that's cool.
Me as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Jumping into updates here, I like literally don't even know the last time that I updated all you guys on dieting things or where I was. So we'll start with that. And as of yesterday, I hit a current new low for me, which was 185.8 pounds. I am now in week 8 of the diet, so I'm like 7.5 weeks in. Which is kind of wild to be at like 185.8 at this point. That I was reflecting in my story last week about how in 2020 my diet ended at 185. So I'm like at that point right now, 7 weeks into this diet. And granted, the first diet in 2020 started at 202 pounds or something like that. So it was a 17-pound drop to get there. But now I'm there and it's wild. And then the next year, so in 2021, I went all the way down to like 182. And this time, I don't exactly know where. I would like to say that maybe I go even lower, like to 180, see what that looks like. And then it kind of feels like I'm just a better version of myself at lower body weights. And I made a reference yesterday, actually, in my story to how sometimes I wonder, because of how many positive, subjective things happen to me as I diet, whether I'm just like maybe meant to be in a smaller body and that maybe like 195 to 200 is just like too large for my frame or biologically where I'm supposed to be, because I don't feel as good up there. And I actually had a number of people, including Shantae, DM me and be like, hey, I'd love to hear you expand on this, like maybe I belong in a smaller body idea on the podcast. And so I guess I don't have a whole ton to expand on it. It's just an idea that popped into my head. But kind of the rationale that I use when thinking about that idea or coming up with it in my brain is that so food quality, when I'm at 195 to 200, food quality goes down for me because I just can't eat enough healthy food to sustain that body weight. So that was kind of sign number one was, hey, maybe if like you're sticking to a healthy diet, your body naturally finds a homeostasis that's lower than where it is currently. And granted, like I love all those foods. You guys hear me talk about this all the time. Like I love cheesesteaks. I love baking. Like I bake all the time. I even talked about on the story recently how I have this thing that I'm still doing with my kids called yogurt and batter, where we take a big ass tub of skyr and we just put dobs of batter into the skyr and take bites of it as we're baking. So like these are things that I like truly endear and love. And I don't necessarily want to stop doing them, but it's still the idea in the brain of like, hey, if I were eating healthy, my body weight probably would be lower. That's something that is interesting to me. Second is the fact that sleep improves when I diet. And on my story yesterday, I was talking about how the last week has been the best sleep I've had in a year. Like I've woken up once in the middle of the night. I've been averaging almost 8 hours of sleep. So I'm waking up once at like 3:30 a.m. I go pee, I go back to sleep for another 2 hours. I'm getting like a 6-hour chunk of sleep before I even wake up, which is an anomaly for me. Like that never happens. When I'm in, yeah, Aaron has a comment. Jump in, sir.
I have plenty of comments. But I think it would be great to let's tie into the sleep one. So
Yeah.
With the sleep, do you think, or do you know if you are someone who is impacted, your sleep is impacted with the proximity of when your final meal is?
Yeah, well, I think it's as much proximity as it is the size of the final meal. And so when I find myself in a surplus, regardless of whether I eat super close to bed or not, just the fact that there's like a surplus of calories, I almost always wake up hot in the middle of the night. And then I find myself struggling to fall back to sleep for 20 or 30 minutes because I'm hot. And I know that's just my body, like the metabolic furnace is burning, it's processing things, et cetera, et cetera. Like I get that. But again, I think that's just another like kind of clue of like, dude, you seem to do better when you're not eating as much food in general. So that would be my thought there.
Yeah, it's like there's a phrase like cause doesn't equal causation.
Correlation doesn't equal
exactly.
causation.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I agree 100% with you. And there are things that I very, very much so myself mimic in feeling where it really hit me my last diet, where it's like oftentimes like, and rightfully so in many contexts, like dieting is portrayed in a negative light, but for people like you and I who are generally unique cases when we're speaking to the entire population, dieting forces me to live a healthier lifestyle, because in order to do that, I need to eat better quality foods to facilitate the margins. But I mean, I agree, like I feel really good, but I mean, it's generally I'm eating a shit ton of vegetables, like way more than I normally do, just because I can't eat that much vegetables and still get in all the other amount of food I need in a caloric surplus. And I'm also eating at 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., which then, all that food is not digested by the time you're going to sleep. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately what I'm really getting at is I agree with you. I think there's these different factors that really all kind of add into this combination of like, when you want to hold more muscle mass than your body naturally actually wants to hold on to, you need to take trade-offs to keep it and it's kind of what you're finding with, you just feel better at a lower body weight and you're leaner, you look more jacked even though you're technically smaller, and then subjectively you're getting a lot of these positive responses from your body as well.
Yeah. I think that ultimately what it comes down to is that each person has like a range, and maybe that range is bigger than you think. Like people think of your range as your homeostasis, like where your body tends to settle, left of your own healthy-ish habits or whatever. But I wonder if that range is much bigger. Like I wonder if my range is like 183 to 196 or something like that. And like I can feel good in that range, kind of the middle of it might be best, and then like it's still pretty good toward the top of that range, and it's still pretty good toward the bottom, but then you can get too low where things turn around and go the wrong way, and you can get too high where things turn around and go the wrong way. And maybe I'm just kind of like in the middle of that range right now, like 185, 186 is like, okay, maybe I'm approaching the bottom of it, but I'm still good type thing. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe there's like really something to that. And I know for sure that I will get too low at some point if I decide to go on stage. Like, it's not like I'm going to continue feeling better into the 170s and be like, man, I'm really meant to be 162 or something like that, you know? So, I mean, there's certainly a range there, and it's easy. You know, I'm still only in week 8 of the diet. Last year, my diet was 18 weeks. So I was starting to kind of become a little disillusioned with the diet toward the end last time, as you would after 18 weeks of doing something. Whereas this time, like, it's been different. And one of the things that's really different is that oh man, I just completely lost my train of thought because I was going back to the idea of being in a smaller body, and there were 2 other things that I wanted to talk about regarding that. One being that I feel like it's easier to move my body through space on a daily basis. So like I go for walks and stuff, and it just kind of feels like I'm putting one foot in front of the other, and it doesn't feel laborious, sort of. It's just kind of like enjoyable, and I'm smelling the fresh air and like all these things. And then the second one is blood work. And I only have last year's data to compare, but when you looked at my pre-diet blood work to my post-diet blood work at 182 or whatever, however low I got, there wasn't significant differences between them. Like there weren't any markers that were, you know, in range pre-diet and then were out of range post-diet. They just kind of skewed a little, you know, higher end of the range, lower end of the range type thing. But they were all for the most part relatively the same, including testosterone. So that was kind of another sign that I was looking at and being like, okay, maybe again, like this smaller body thing has some merit. So that were my last points on that piece. If you have any thoughts on any of that.
No, I mean, I don't. I think from an internal health standpoint, the differences would be probably inconsequential from like, you know, 196 Bryan to 185 Bryan, especially considering like pathological ranges are really meant for like your, not necessarily like obese people, but your Gen Pop American, which is would love to be 196 Bryan. You know what I mean? The one thing I will add that I wanted to add into here about coming to Bali is I've talked about this on the podcast before. Every time we move, our schedules change a little bit, like our sleep wake times and those sorts of things. And one thing that I remembered that was probably the most different of any of our other places is last time we were in Bali, we were going to bed at like 9 p.m. and getting up at like 5 a.m. just like naturally. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I wonder why. I wonder if that's going to happen again, sort of thing. And here we are, I've been here for almost a week straight now. And obviously not tonight since we're doing the podcast later, but I have been in bed only after 10 p.m. once this entire week, and twice I have been in bed before 8 p.m. And then I'm up at like 5 to 6 naturally. Like I don't even have an alarm on my phone, and I'm getting up like watching the sunrise and stuff. And I was wondering, like, I'm like, why is this? Because literally 10 days ago I was going to bed at midnight and stuff like this, as much as I didn't want to be. I think it has to do with, because we're close to the equator here, the sun sets and rises like really consistently, and you're not getting like the 9 p.m. it going, you know, it's staying up till 9 p.m. in the summer sort of thing. So like the sun is setting at like 6, you know, and then it's dark for like hours already, which kind of gives your body a little bit of that signaling. But then also you spend a lot more time outside, right? I'm getting a ton of sunshine. You're outside more, and then like you're just really kind of hot and sweaty a lot too. So I think that just kind of like wears you down. By like 7 p.m. I'm like yawning and stuff, and I'm like, I could literally fucking go to bed. And a couple of days I'm like, hey, I know I'm low on sleep, like I'm just gonna go to bed. And I've been sleeping really, really good. So it's really interesting how literally just like removing or changing your environment can like drastically change just like your sleep wake times and stuff. So I'm super, super excited about that, because I'm like you, I'm a morning person, and I love that fact that I'm up at like 5:36. Like I have a call tomorrow morning at like 5:30, and normally I would be like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I have this call at 5:30. And I'm just like, I'll be literally fine. I'll just grab some coffee and I'll be good and enjoy it. So It is pretty cool to see how that can change.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm actually super envious that you get sunset at like 6 p.m. or something like that, because I was even lamenting last night to Kim as we're trying to put the kids to sleep and the sun is still like blaring in Vivi's window and this 2-year-old child is up at 8:15 and I'm like, what is going on right now? You know, I'm going to go to sleep. And then by the time the kids get to sleep, it's fucking 9 o'clock and I'm got to be up at 5 for a podcast. It's like, it just doesn't work with my lifestyle super well, you know?
Yeah, I get it.
Cool. Well, jumping back into diet things real quick. I actually don't remember what I was even talking about before I then lost my train of thought, but kind of moving on to some other stuff and maybe it'll come back to me. I bought a bike, which is super cool. I just bought a mountain bike. The first kind of real awesome mountain bike I've ever had that's like got, you know, it's got a hydraulic seat, which is wild. I just like push a button and the seat goes up and down. And it's got like, you know, rear and front suspension and stuff. So I intend to kind of use that and get out and do some more rides. But since buying it last week, I've gone out 3 times and done kind of biking just around town with it to get comfortable with the bike. And maybe that's contributing a little bit to some of the progress I've made in the weight loss category, because it's a relatively new thing, which means that when you do new stuff, you burn more calories. Your body's just not super efficient at it. And from a guy that only walks usually, that's just how I accrue steps or expend energy or whatever. This is just a way that's more intense. So my heart rate is higher. Like when I walk, I operate between about 70 and 85 beats per minute walking. And on my bike, I was between 100 and 140 most of the time. So that was cool. And I feel like it provides me another avenue to kind of just get outside, enjoy, do fitness, and be in better shape type thing. Along with that, one other piece that is super interesting is, and I don't put too much credence in what my watch tells me for my VO2 max, but I do think that comparing, you know, what the watch is telling me to what the watch told me months ago has some sort of relevance. So when I was the larger version of Bryan, through the time I was in San Diego and then right before starting the diet, my VO2 max, according to my watch, was quite low. It was very poor. It was a 38.5 is what it was telling me. And then through this diet, up until the point that I started biking, so I can't even count the biking as something that was contributing to this, the VO2 max has been going up every single week throughout the diet with me doing nothing, no changes in lifestyle or anything, just losing weight. So I think this is interesting because I had a poll on my story before starting the diet and everyone was like, no, you have to do cardio to improve your VO2 max. And I was like, no, check out this study. If you just lose weight, your VO2 max will improve because of the way it's calculated, how much shit it has to go through to get to your body, et cetera, et cetera. So now I'm 185 pounds and my VO2 max is 43, which is no longer in the poor below average range. I'm just creeping up into average. And I really, again, haven't done any cardio or anything like that. I've just lost weight. And I think that speaks to like the ease of movement through space piece as well that I mentioned earlier.
Question for you. Do you think that your recent metabolic blocks may have contributed to that at all? The improvement of that?
It may have. It's hard to separate that out and be sure. I really think that it was the weight loss more than anything. And the reason I say that is because when I was in San Diego for 5 weeks, I also biked everywhere. Like I was biking to the gym and back every day. So I was getting about an hour of biking in on top of like my normal walking and playing with the kids and stuff like that. And my VO2 max didn't move. It was still at 38.5 the entire time I was in San Diego. So I don't know how much actual training contributed to that.
Yeah, I forgot about the biking in San Diego. That's really interesting. Because it's not like, don't get me wrong. I completely get that, weight loss would improve VO2 max. It's just surprising to me that going from like a 13% body fat to like a 11 where you probably currently are now, or maybe 10 or something like that would give you that sort of improvement. If you were starting at
you could say I was like 15, but
15. Okay.
Yeah. 15 to 10 maybe. Like you could say I went from 15 to 10. That's 12 pounds of body weight, something like that, 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so another kind of just interesting story about VO2 max is when I did the OPEX certification, I was in the middle of my competitive CrossFit days, man. It was like 2013 or something like that. And they had one of those like handheld VO2 max things where you hold it up to your mouth, you take a big breath and you blow into it, and it gives you like a score based on how much power of air you emit or whatever it is. And in the midst of my CrossFit days competing, like apparently the best cardiovascular shape I should have been in, and I blew a 42.5. And James Fitzgerald, the owner of OPEX, looked at me and he goes, no wonder you struggle with Metcons type thing, you know? And I was like, man, I'm competing in CrossFit. Like I'm actually kind of good at this thing, but I'm clearly being held back because my VO2 max was quite low, you know? So I'm still experiencing the same thing. And yet at this point, according to my watch, which I don't know how it correlates to one of those blow things, but it's apparently higher now than it was when I was competing in CrossFit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know a lot of times the DEXA places will also do like VO2 max tests and stuff. So maybe after you wrap up the diet, you just go get some hard data somewhere, and then you can have more to compare. I mean, that's the cool thing is like as the years go by, there's more things that you can easily compare with a little bit more, more objective data, which is I think super fascinating. That's like something that makes me so excited for when we stop traveling is like getting my DEXA place that I can really recreate from and getting some of that different testing, various testing done, which I just love. I love nerding out on that shit.
I'd love to do that too. The last thing I have on my kind of dieting piece is I have this side chat that me, Abel, and Dave McConey are in together, and we send videos and pictures back and forth all day. But I was talking to Abel about how I tend to hold most of my fat, on my glutes and hamstrings. And he was like, send me a picture. Like, so I did a little like pseudo bodybuilding posing routine for the group. And he responded back and he goes, man, this is insane. You are like 8% body fat in your torso. You're like 10 or 12% body fat in your quads, and your hamstrings are like obese. Like they're like 22% body fat was actually the number he used, 22% body fat. And so, man, like I watched the video, of course, a number of times and analyzed myself. And I'm starting to think now that it's not that my hamstrings are weak or underdeveloped. I've been specializing in them now for almost an entire year. I just think that I hold a shit ton of body fat there. And it's like, it's really discouraging for me to even think about the idea of going to stage, requiring me to get down to these super low body fat percentages, because I think that genetically, the way that I hold this fat is I'm going to have to sacrifice so much muscle on my torso and upper body arms to get my hamstrings lean enough that I don't know if it's worth it. Like, I don't know that I'm going to want to deal with how miserable that's going to feel. I don't know if I'm going to want to deal with this psychological effect of watching my upper body shrink so much just to get my hamstrings lean enough. And so anyway, it just kind of like, it was kind of a bit of a slap in the face of like, I always looked at this as a genetic asset that I held my fat here, because my purpose of training up until 4 or 5 years ago was to just look as jacked as I could on the beach and whatever. And so if you're a dude who holds your fat in your hamstrings, you wear board shorts and it just looks like you have a muscular butt and hamstrings and everything else is shredded. It's perfect, right? But when you start thinking about it in the context of competing and then some of the things that I mentioned about my upper body having to shrink so much, it's a bit discouraging.
If I were to be completely transparent with you, that has been my thoughts around getting on stage ever is like, I don't want this to come off that like I'm speaking down towards like natural bodybuilding or anything like that, but I just don't have much interest of being 170 pounds and not being very jacked to get on stage. It doesn't sound appealing to me. Like, so that's a large portion of why I have never really been that interested in doing it. Because I don't think I'd be really great at it either. But not to digress too far, but I think with you, like I agree with that. That would be a potentially really just rough to get down, knowing that that's like you're lagging or where you're holding your body fat. I still think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Getting a Dutch test could be really helpful, because if there might be something, because with the lab work that we order, right, it's really comprehensive compared to what you're going to get from like your, a physical or whatever with your doctor. However, it's not going to give you your androgen and estrogen pathways. It's not going to give you the 3 different estrogens and stuff like that. And you could have something like that that's off, right? And there could be another way that you could go about it that could redistribute or improve those fat storage patterns. So at the worst case, you're getting a lot more information. Best case, there might be a way that you don't have to sacrifice all of your upper body, muscle mass to get your hamstrings to come in. So,
yeah, no, that's a good point. It's probably something I will consider once I'm done with this diet and back into like normal things. Cool. Well, that's really all I have for right now on dieting stuff. I have some training and hypertrophy chat about my my cycle and all that. But let's. What do you have else going on with you, man? What do you want to discuss?
Yeah. So one thing that I did. So the gym. I will talk about this. So I talked a bunch of shit on my Instagram the other day around gyms with air conditioning and stuff like that, and how I had like one really swampy, sweaty gym session, and I was just in heaven. I enjoyed so much of it. And then I went to the other gym. There's like pretty much 2 big like gyms here with like equipment and stuff like that. The other one's not air conditioned. The other one is. The air conditioned gym has pendulum, hack squat, lever squat, like the whole 9. And I was like, motherfucker. And like for me, like my legs are my lagging body part. Like it sounds silly, but like I will join a gym just because it has the pendulum squat, even if it is more expensive than all these other things, because what we now know about just how much better the pendulum squat is for leveraging, quad development. And it has the hack squat. The other one doesn't even have a hack squat. So I ended up eating my words, and like 2 days after making that post, I'm joining the gym with the fucking air conditioning. But they also have this like recovery side of it too. So there's like cold tubs, a sauna, like a big sauna. It's really, really kind of really cool. So I went in the cold tub. It's like 4 degrees Celsius, which is about, I think like 40, low 40s Fahrenheit. So I mean, it's
pretty
cold.
Standard.
Yeah, it's like, you get it in your nuts or in your chest type of thing. So I get in, was talking to some people, and I was like, all right, I'm going to spend like 10 minutes in here. And then we ended up having like this really cool conversation. So you adapt after about that amount of time. Then everyone I had gotten in with had gotten out, and this other lady got in, and we ended up just having this like conversation, and I kind of got like lost in it, and I stayed in this cold tub way too fucking long, and I ended up being in there for like 30 some minutes. And then when I went to get out, like I literally fucking couldn't. Like my limbs had all shut down, and I had to I got in the deep end. I just like lowered myself in, and I tried to like press myself out, and I was like, I literally can't. So I had to like crawl up the steps to get out, and then my body was just like not functioning. And I was like, I got to go in the sauna. And I went in the sauna, and I was like dripping sweat in the sauna, but like my bones were still like frozen. And I was like getting slightly concerned. And then after like an hour or so, I felt like pretty much normal. But I was like, next time I have to pay attention and cannot go in there for like 30 minutes, like unplanned. So that was pretty funny that happened. And then one thing that I've been joking around about this, and I think you had a note that around N1 stuff you had coming up, which is cool. But I've kind of found like that ignorance is bliss sort of scenario, because now when I go into like gyms or whatever, I'm like, oh man, they don't have any fucking cables. I'm like becoming like a gym snob. I'm like, there's no fucking pendulum here. There's no hack squat. And I'm like, why did they buy this equipment and all these things are done poorly? And I'm like, before I just used to be able to go to the gym and enjoy it. And then I learned about CAS and N1 and all of these things and how to optimize things. And now I'm just like, fuck. I kind of feel like I was happier before because I didn't know any of this stuff, but now I'm just like, fuck, why can't every gym just be like how I want it to be? And of course that's completely outlandish, but it is pretty funny how now when I pop in places, I'm like, man, this machine was designed like really fucking poorly, and I just think about how I can improve it to some way.
Instead of ignorance is bliss, maybe it's knowledge is power.
It's kind of like those two things are the exact same, but sometimes like you don't want the power, when you can't like change it.
Yeah.
It's just like
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So that's been funny,
Yeah.
for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I totally relate to that too, man. Even like, well, you know what's interesting? I do that. I go to N1 relatively often now.
I know, I'm super jealous.
Whatever that means. But I cannot get myself to like that seated leg curl. Like I very much prefer the seated leg curl that I have at my house better than that. That's the only piece of equipment, the only one where I'm just like, I go there and I'm like, I kind of am like not a huge fan of it. But I really don't like the shin pads. And I don't like that it doesn't allow you to achieve a full range of motion at the stretch position. It's like I don't need a full range. Like I don't need it to the point where like it's going to be all gastroc in the first 15 degrees type thing. But I feel like it's stopping me so shy that my leg is still bent maybe 15, 20 degrees. And that's where you're initiating the rep from. And it just like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel great on my knee. I've actually heard people talk about that with the shin thing too, that like it kind of made their knee feel weird too. So for whatever reason, like that's the one piece of equipment where I like the one that I have at home. But yeah, I mean, what a privilege to be able to go to N1. And then the last 2 times I've been there, I've been able to use that cable hip extension, which
that thing is badass. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. Like I have a good hip extension now since I bought my new one with the calf pads on it. I really like it because it allows me to actually, do dumbbell hip extensions with my arms outstretched instead of having to hold them into my chest. But that one there is like, I mean, it's so much better than the one that I have, and the cable is so smooth. So I got up to 190 pounds per stack for 7 reps. And Cass is doing 250 a stack for a similar amount of reps, which is nuts. But there's 350 per stack. So imagine like you can literally overload that thing forever. Like I will never even probably do what Cass does, much less 350. Like that thing is insane. But speaking of kind of all the N1 stuff, I'm actually going to have the opportunity, I think, to shadow finally on June 11th. So I'm still working out the details with Kim because apparently we signed up to go to some like farm fest with the kids that same day. But I think I'm going to be shadowing at N1 instead. We'll see. And so that'd be a cool day. It's a first practical in a while. So I think there'll be a bunch of people, and it's a Saturday, which is the torso day, I guess you would call it, like chest and lats, which is probably one of my favorite days there as well. And then the following weekend at N1, they have the Progressive Overload Seminar. So Cass has partnered up with Bryan Minor, and they're doing a kind of progressive overload thing, lecture, tutorial, hands-on thing. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that back-to-back weekends of, hey, Kim, I'm going to go to N1 and hang out. Bye. That doesn't work super well. So I'm going to probably end up having to do that one virtually, which is fine. But I did, when I was at N1 the other day, I got to meet Cass's friend Joey, and I walked in and I didn't know who I was meeting. Cass was just like, hey, I have a buddy in town that's thinking about moving here. And I walk in and I was like, oh, it's the guy from the videos. So, when you're watching the biomechanics videos before you go to the thing, and there's that guy that does a lot of the anatomy stuff. Mm-hmm. So I walked in and it was that guy. And so we got to hang out. He's thinking about moving here, which is cool. And he and Cass are both around my age. So it's cool to like be able to connect with some other guys that are similar in age as well. So hopefully he ends up moving here. And then the last thing about N1 is was Valerie part of your practical?
She was.
Yeah. So she's in town this week, and she and I have kind of connected, I guess, through you on DM. We've kind of been chatting for the last few months, but I'm gonna try and get up to N1 this week and see her while she's here. And so I thought that she was part of your practical. I just thought that was an interesting thing as well.
Yeah, she's super super cool, super knowledgeable. We'll drop some details for people to go follow her. She like explains a lot of the N1 content like really well on her stories and stuff like that, and how she sets it up in like a traditional commercial gym. And she lives in Salt Lake, which is super cool because that's still where I would like to move when we're done traveling.
I actually don't know if I knew that she was in Salt Lake. That's rad. And yeah, I like her content a lot. So she's like at Valerie Lusvardi, Lusvardi, I believe. You should be able to find her that way. But you can hit us up if you want to follow her. She's awesome.
Yeah. She's
and so yeah, what do you have some other stuff to talk about here?
I
or
do.
Should I jump into training?
I do. Yeah. I'm actually decided I'm hiring another coach for myself while I'm here, which I'm super, super excited about. As much as I hate to admit it, since the beginning of the year, like my training in my own personal nutrition has just been on the back burner. Everything's been super business focused. And then I just know like, and I've been super, super vocal about this. Like everyone, I believe at least everyone like needs coaches and stuff like that. Like I consider myself a pretty damn decent like nutrition coach. When I try and coach myself, I'm fucking garbage because like I can't be the coach and the client at the same time for myself. I just won't do it. I'll just like, I like to pretend that I'm special and that I like can get away with things that I wouldn't let my clients get away with and stuff. And it's hard to be that same, I kind of would imagine like trying to be the parent and a friend type dynamic with your child. So I'm outsourcing my training. Training is primarily what I'm looking for, but obviously nutrition comes along with that. I really love just like focusing on executing. And then it also kind of makes me feel like an athlete again, bringing back some of that, like that kind of like valor from your younger years. So I'm super, super excited about that. I have a call with someone in the morning. I'll probably not provide any names and stuff just in case things go south for whatever reason. But I'm hoping to start that. I'm super, super excited about. And one thing that was really, really cool is I was talking with my girlfriend Jenny about this. Like I am at what I consider right now like a low, like a pretty off for my own personal standards for just like my nutrition, current physique, etc. But what's really cool is like my like bad months now where I've like I'm using air quotes hard here, like let myself go, is still leaps and bounds better than what I looked like, at the top of my game 3-4 years ago, which is super, super cool. And I explain this a lot with my clients is like nutrition and training, like it's a long game. Like the more and longer you do it, the better you get at it, like the better things get. And because so much of like even my off days are like, today was the first day realistically that I have tracked my food since the Tuesday before I left. So, it's been a full 2 weeks now. This has been the longest I've ever gone in probably in 4 or 5 years without tracking my food. But my framework is identical. I know I always try and eat this amount of meals. My meals always look like this. And it's like, even though I'm like at my recent worst, it's still really cool that like I still have abs, right? I still have like veins in my quads when I'm training them and stuff like that. And it's just cool to know that like I've put so many tiny drops in that investment bucket that this is like what my off look is. As much as I'm still not happy with it, it's still cool to know that like, wow, 5 years ago, like I would have dreamed about this. And this is what I'm complaining about is like being my off look now, which is cool.
It's like the equivalent of just doing barbell back squats for your quads.
Yeah. Yep. And then the last thing I have, which would be it for me, is so unfortunately, like prepping my food here is just not going to be a realistic scenario. And like the kitchen's just small, and like especially for how much food that I just require day to day, like I'd be cooking every other day, and like I'm just not going to do that. So looking at options here, I really don't want to be like just ordering meals out all the time, even though there's tons of really quality meals and stuff, and I could make that work. But we have some friends here who run a restaurant. So I actually reached out to them and I'd be like, hey, can you guys run some numbers and and just let me know how much you would charge me to just bulk me like meat and vegetables and rice. So I'm going to see how that works out.
That's awesome.
But they have like a cool restaurant it's called Macro Kitchen, and it's all like super health focused, and they provide macros on all their stuff. And I'm like, yeah, hey, would this be an option if I just like, you guys just gave me like 3 kilos of 2 meats and like 3 kilos of vegetables for like a 4 or 5 day period. So I'm really hoping that that's going to work out, and then I can just like, it'll be mindless. And then all that time that I would spend cooking and stuff, I can just fucking work anyway, which is really what I want to do. So I'm really hoping that works out, because then I can just like, man, it'll be so easy. All my training's taken care of. Someone else is doing my nutrition, right? I can like put all my food in Chronometer in the beginning of the week and just like copy pasta my days through the week. And all I have to worry about is like sleeping, working, which I want to do anyway, and like going to the gym. And I'm really hoping everything works out, because I'm going to be super, super pumped about all of that.
Dude, that's amazing. I actually think that's a way better idea than cooking yourself, for sure. It kind of reminds me of when we were in Costa Rica. Toward the end, I realized like I developed a relationship with one of the local like restaurant girls. And so the last few weeks we were there, I just started buying like 5 pounds of chicken from the local farm, and they would actually ship to the gym, and then the gym owner would give it to me. And I would take it to this restaurant, and for $13 US, they would grill all my chicken for me. And then they would throw in like, some garlic bread and some potatoes and a whole bunch of veggies. And they'd all just like put it in these massive to-go containers. And I was just like, man, I should have been doing this from the beginning. $13 plus the cost of chicken, And it was like amazing. Like they use incredible like flavors and everything. So yeah, I think you got a good gig there.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully that can start within the next day or so, because I'm at the end of what I was able to cook for myself the other day. So.
Very cool. Well, I look forward to seeing those meals too.
Yeah, that's it for me though.
Yeah, cool. Well, I have just now training. So the last that we spoke about training on this podcast, I was just finishing up my metabolic cycle, and I was talking about how excited I was to jump into hypertrophy. And now here we are. We're 2 weeks in at this point. So I just want to break down kind of my training program and go over some of the things that are cool in it, and talk about some of that a little bit. So usually when I set up my training programs, I have kind of what would be considered like 2 microcycles or 2 rotations to get through 1 microcycle. And what I mean by that is like a simple example is like someone might go push, pull, legs, rest, repeat, push, pull, legs, rest type thing. And in that way, you have 2 different rotations. So you have a different exercise variety and stuff like that. I've always enjoyed that because I like the variety. I like, not getting back to the same movement again until 10 days later or something along those lines. But I also didn't like the complexity of it, and kind of not knowing already every time going into my session exactly what I was doing. Like I would always have to like look into my app and be like, okay, is it session 1 or is it session 2 or whatever? And so this time I just decided to make a 4 session microcycle. And so it's basically 4 days a week or 4 days out of 6 days. I kind of, because I don't like a calendar week, I just kind of let it roll. Whatever it is, it is. If it's 2 on 1 off or 2 on 2 off, like it's fine, or every other day, whatever. But this time it is going hamstring day with leg extensions. I'll address that later. Hamstring day with leg extensions. The second day is chest, lats, and delts. The third day is quads with leg curls. I'll also cover that. And then the fourth day is basically full upper body. I was writing it out, and initially I called it upper back, delts, and arms. But then I realized that I had like one exercise for chest on there. And like, I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. It's just an upper body day, but it's like a delt arm priority day or whatever. And so those are my 4 days. And the cool thing about that split is that the way that it's organized is it's actually hitting each muscle group twice over the 6 or 7 day microcycle. It's just having one day that's more of a priority, for example, like quad day, but then there's leg curls on quad day. And then there's like chest and lat day, but then you're also hitting some chest and lats on delt and arm day. It's just not the priority day type thing. So, I really like this setup a lot, and I'll use the leg days as examples of kind of how I set this up and why. So I have quad day, but I have leg curls, and I have ham day, but I have leg extensions. And when I'm doing that single muscle group focus on the other muscle group day, I don't even know the right way to explain that, but when I'm doing leg extensions on hamstring day, I'm doing the leg extensions with a short overload focus, and I'm doing a pause at the contraction to even make it more short or overloaded. And so I chose that basically for 2 reasons. One, because I felt like it would have no impact on the subsequent day. So like if I do 2 or 3 sets of short overload leg extensions, it's not like I can't come back and do a really hard quad day 3 days later. And then alternatively, the other way around, it's like if I just did that really hard quad day 3 days earlier, and then I'm still like mildly sore going into my hamstring day, I can still do short overload leg extensions. Like unless I'm debilitatingly sore, which I don't think I would be 3 days later, I can do short overload leg extensions. And that was my theory going into it. But to make sure that it was proven and that it works properly, I needed to actually see a day where I was in fact still sore going into the leg extensions and see whether there was decrement in performance. Because if I get there and I'm still slightly sore and I go to do these leg extensions and my performance is lower than it was the prior week, then that doesn't work. My theory is shot, right? So yesterday was that exact situation. I did my quads 3 or 4 days earlier. I came to hamstring and I did my leg extensions with sore quads. But I was able to add weight and match reps with equal effort. So that kind of proved my theory to me that it was a good way of setting that up. And then we'll see the same thing on the quad day with the short overload pause contraction on the leg curls. So that should work pretty well. And then it's kind of the same idea with the upper body days. So like I have that chest and lats and delt day. But then there's still some chest work on the other upper body day. It's just like more of like a cable press thing. So it's a little bit more short overloaded. There's no like, lengthened overload dumbbell fly type thing. So overall, 2 weeks into the program, that setup has worked super well. And I have obviously some more to chat on there, but do you have any thoughts on that initial stuff?
I do. So I have always, I shouldn't say always, but overwhelmingly the majority of times have done like the 2 days of a body part, two different days. Now this is my initial thought, right? So it's largely subjective, but it's the reason I brought it up because I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I've always been like fearful of running, shorter or smaller number of day cycles like this for the fear of like, okay, so I guess I should ask you realistically, let's say, what is day 1 of this? It's the day 1 is the quad focus day,
the ham
right?
day. It's
Okay,
the ham day
the
with
ham
the leg
day.
extensions.
Okay, let's say you do that on Monday. Realistically, when would you hit that day again? Saturday?
It would be Sunday or Monday.
Okay, so I think is a large enough time period. So I was having a conversation with someone earlier this week, and they're running like a 3-day training, like a push pull legs kind of thing. but they only have like one, it's only like a 3-day cycle. And he's like, well, sometimes I don't take, the fourth rest day. I'm like, so you're telling me you do like your push workout on Monday and then you do it again on Thursday? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, I'm pretty sure like you're not going to be able to progress that quickly. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not a good idea. So when you were explaining it to me, I'm like, well, I don't know. Is my logic flawed here? But that's enough time, I feel like, to be recovered to be able to actually push that training session again. So I do like the simplicity, because then you don't have to like create variation for the sake of variation when you really just want to do that one movement again, because like you do it really, really well and you get a great contraction and stuff with it. It's not like, well, fuck, I'm doing that on my day one. Now on the second day, I need to find like a backup or something like that. So I do really like the simplicity of it. I've never run one like that with appropriate timing in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could just look at it as like a 4 times a week training program. Like, while some weeks it might be, every 6 days, I think many weeks it's probably just going to end up being every 7 days. So it would be just like if you were running, like a bro split back in the day, but like a 4-day bro split, maybe where it's 2 muscle groups each day or something. I just organized it in a much more intelligent manner where I'm still hitting like a main muscle group and then I'm doing it again in a smaller capacity, right? But one area that in the main drawback I had to making this ultimate decision that I was going to do it this way literally came down to having to choose between the pendulum and the linear hack squat that I have in my basement, because every other cycle I've run, because I've had, 2 quad days, I've had 1 day with pendulum and I've had 1 day with linear hack. But this cycle, I literally had to choose, like, which one am I going to do, And I ended up choosing pendulum, but I'm not even, like, super happy with that decision, because pendulum takes so much out of me, and it does obviously, yes, give me a massive stimulus, but like mentally, psychologically, I have to get more amped up to do 135 pounds on the pendulum than I do to do 600 pounds on the linear hack. Like, there's just something about the linear hack, the way I set it up with my heels elevated and my feet low and the knees forward type thing, where it's just really, really, really good for me. And I feel like I can progress it. Whereas with pendulum, sometimes I just feel like I'm just beating my head against the wall. Like, I just go in and like, it just feels fucking hard every day. And I don't know that progress is even occurring type thing, So there's like a part of me that's even considering swapping pendulum out. And the only reason that I haven't for the linear hack is because like I have a pendulum. Like, wouldn't it be so weird to like have this routine in my basement? Like, I only have so many machines to choose from, and yet I'm deciding not to do the pendulum, which is like the premier quad movement, So just out of like kind of feelings of what I feel like I should be doing, I have the pendulum in. But if I were to really like look at which one I think I get the best stimulus and like psychological effect from, I would say the linear hack is probably better for me. So I'm still in between those, but for the moment I'm sticking with pendulum.
I know exactly what you're saying. To the listeners are probably going to think we're like fucking nuts, but I feel like it's just not like, there's no way for us to quantify that feeling that we're trying to explain, logically yet. But it's one of those things like progressing the pendulum. It's like, yes, I hit my rep targets. Like, I can add weight now. And then you realize what that means. You're like, oh, next week, like I have to do what I did. I had to go through that feeling I just went through with more weight on. And it's like the stimulus is great, but like the psychological toll is brutal. So, I mean, I get it. I completely get what you're saying. I just don't have like the proper terminology of how I would love to, explain it, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as long as you know what I'm talking about, man. So anyway, I think it'll depend on what I ultimately end up choosing here, but I really do get like a really, really good stimulus from the linear hack, and it just feels really good too. Like, it doesn't scare me in the way that the pendulum kind of scares me. So I may end up swapping that, but we will see. Okay, so let's see. From there, a couple other interesting things about the program to discuss are. I have a split squat set up that's pretty cool. It's that front foot, back foot elevated one. And I'm putting my front foot on it's not a jerk block, but it's something that's like, I wouldn't even know what to describe it as, but it's maybe like 8 inches off the ground. So it gives me plenty of clearance with the back leg elevated too, so that I can get into like super, super deep knee flexion. And so that was really good. And I also bought 2 new gym toys. So I bought Prime wedges, the 20-degree ones. They just arrived a day or 2 ago. And I also bought a gym pin, which is the way that you would add extra weight to a cable stack if you're strong enough to do the whole stack. And I'm not quite ready for the gym pin yet on my one-arm pull-arounds, but I'm close. So I'm really excited to be able to use the gym pin eventually, if not during this diet, then hopefully the next time that I get out of the diet and start kind of progressing things back up again. And then the wedges, man, I don't know if I just hadn't seen Prime wedges in the confines of my gym space, but those things are massive. I had no idea how big they actually are, to the point that I don't even know if I can use them on my split squat with the little box that I elevate my foot on. I think the wedge is actually bigger than the foot platform that I'm using right now for my split squat. And I also don't know yet if they're going to work super well on my linear hack squat if I decide to use them on there. So yeah, I guess I was just really surprised how big they are. And I just need to spend a little bit of time finagling around with my setups on some of these movements so that I can actually use the wedge and then still have room to put my foot so that the toe box is planted on the ground and not just suspended on the wedge itself. So anyway, I don't remember them being that large, and it just kind of floored me when they arrived, and I went to put them on a machine and I was like, they don't even fit type thing. So that was a surprise.
They are big. Definitely. I do remember them being and I remember thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh, these things are fucking huge. Like each one's probably 12 inches wide sort of thing.
12 inches long and 6 inches wide type thing.
Yeah, they're big. Yeah.
Yeah. So on my pull arounds where I hope to use the gym pin, I'm taking some of that Cass told me. I mentioned this on the Birdo episode in the very beginning when we were going over updates. But we were talking about, lengthening the lat as we often do. And he was talking about how in the past I've always done the pull arounds, and then when I've failed in a pull around, I've shifted my hips forward and I've been able to accrue a couple more reps with more of a mechanical advantage. He suggested that this time around, if I'm really trying to focus on lengthening the lat, is maybe I stay in the pull around instead of shifting into the hips forward position, and then I just do some partials or eventually maybe a reverse drop set while staying in the pull around. So that's something that I'm going to incorporate into this cycle as well. But as I've discussed many times regarding my progression model in my training programs, it kind of involves gradually adding in these intensity techniques. So on a movement that is short overloaded, I start week 1 at something like 2 reps from failure. And then the next week might be 1 rep from failure. And then the next week might be failure. And then the next week after that might be a couple partial reps. And then the week after that might be a reverse drop set. So when we're talking about using partial reps and reverse drop sets on something like a pull around for me, we're talking about doing that on the 2 weeks before a deload week. That isn't something that every week I'm coming in and I'm like reverse drop set, then reverse drop set, then reverse drop set. And every week is just beating myself into the ground with reverse drop sets. No, I use it a little bit more intelligently than that, I think. So, given that I'm in week 2 right now, I just went to about 1 RIR on my pull arounds. So next week will be potentially 0. And then the week after that would be partials. And then the week after that would be reverse drop set. So we're still a few weeks away from seeing that. But that is something I'm kind of excited about utilizing here in this manner as we get going. And then just a real quick touch on volume. Volume is pretty low, and I'm actually surprised how low it is as I'm going through this, and my sessions are taking 90 minutes, and I'm getting sore, and I'm feeling like I'm getting a really good stimulus from this and all that good stuff. Like I did quads on Thursday with 6 total sets, and they were still sore yesterday on Monday when I did my leg extensions. So that's 4 days later, they're sore from 6 sets, which means that if I was doing 6 sets on Thursday, 2 sets on Monday, that's 8 sets of quads a week. We're finding similar volumes across most other muscle groups. So I'm adding 1 additional set for upper body. So like my chest and lat stuff is 3 sets per movement instead of 2. But that's still only, I'm doing 8 sets a week of chest, and I guess, honestly, 6 sets of lats, but then there's like some upper back work in there too. So even the amount of lat work I'm doing is quite low. I don't think there's a single muscle group that I have that is hitting 10 sets in a microcycle in a week right now. Lateral delts have 9. So that's probably the most. And then direct arm work is 4 sets biceps and 4 sets triceps, along with what other work they get from other stuff. But it's for sure the lowest volumes that I've ever used in a week. Like, to not have a single muscle group exceeding 10 sets is kind of wild to me. And I didn't even think about the significance of that until I went through a full week of training, and it felt like a legit week of training. Like, all of the subjective signs of getting a pump and soreness and fatigue and all these things were there. So it's just crazy, as Berto fucking referenced on our episode with him, that he thinks his delt and arm volume might just continue going down and that it's the lowest it's ever been. And yet that's the muscle group he was specializing on. So it's so weird as we're seeing this, as we become more advanced, that we're just becoming so good at movement and recruiting the muscles that we want to recruit with each rep that we do, that we're getting so much more out of it, that my volumes are lower than they've ever been. And yet I don't feel like I'm in a maintenance phase or anything like that,
I agree. It's what you just explained right there it's what has me question a lot of the research and stuff on volumes and all of these other things, because, and I'm not trying to downplay anyone or discredit anyone, but they just have to make assumptions, right? And like we know, with anything in fucking life, the more assumptions you make, the further the control of the outcomes can be, because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And if even individualizing person to person, if you compared Aaron of today's execution to Aaron of 2.5 years execution for certain movements, it would be a night and day difference. And trying to equate volume within an individual who now has, better execution at certain movements, it changes what you need and what you are able to kind of effectively produce within a given set of volume. In that, it's massive. It's massive.
Yeah. No, 100%, dude. When I was in San Diego, I threw up a video of the last few reps of my hack squat on this one specific machine that I was using from 2018 or 19 or something. And then I threw up the final few reps using the same machine from my recent trip to San Diego. And it was just massively different. Even people that don't have an acute eye for this stuff can see that my negative was faster in 2019. I used the stretch reflex effect. I bounced out of the bottom. I was using my glutes more. My knees were shooting back. All sorts of these compensations were occurring. And so back then I was doing 3 or 4 sets of hack, and then I was doing 2 sets of pendulum, and then 3 sets of leg extensions. And I think about the way I do movement now, and man, if I could do 11 sets of quad work like in a day. It's just like, it just boggles my mind to even think that was possible at one point. But when you're executing it in a manner that is that compensatory, I think that there's just more room for volume than there is when it's so much more acute. You're muted.
I'm sorry. So I said, I agree 100%. And that right there is why I have a really hard time like getting on board with like the volume ramping type stuff, especially for those big movements. Like are you telling me I'm supposed to take 6 sets of hack squat to like 1 RIR today? Like I have to call off work if I'm supposed to do that. Like I can do nothing else. And that's what really comes into play, like of the whole proximity to failure type thing. And but
and like you addressed that really well on the episode with Berto too. For anyone that hasn't heard that yet, if you want to go back, just the prior episode, Aaron talked about some of his skepticism with the training studies and how, the populations that are studied in those studies, even if it's a trained person with 2 to 3 years experience that say squats 315, like just because someone's strong and has a few years experience doesn't mean they can execute movements in such a precise manner. And so then Berto brought up the idea of like, hey, why don't they just have like phones recording people doing these movements? So then you can look at the study and be like, oh, well, that's not how I would perform that movement. Like, obviously they can do 45 sets when they're performing it that way or something along those lines. So, so anyway, all good stuff. And I don't have anything else to add at the moment. I do need to jump off and get my kid to school.
Of course. Let's wrap this one up. As always, Bryan, thanks for hopping on, having a sweet conversation with me. Guys, we'll be back next week. Like always, have a great week.